Hey there, welcome to another episode of Gimme Empathy, the podcast. My name's Scott Mercer, I'm your host. This week on the show is my fourth and final podcast that I recorded in Melbourne. In July of this year, I went down there to visit family and friends and talk to some people on the mic who were very generous with their time. And this fourth one is with Gehan Palipana. I went to high school with Gehan. We often called him the G-Man. And what I probably remember most about him is his sense of humor. I think in the way he would always laugh so readily at your jokes and your dumb Simpsons references and puns. It's really beautiful having a friend who laughs so readily at stuff. It makes you feel really good, and I think it really encourages you to work on your wit. Gehan himself was always a very intelligent and funny guy. He did pretty well academically from memory, and was always just a really nice dude, you know. But as these things sometimes go, as you grow older, you see your school friends less and less. And by the time I caught up with Gehan in July, it had been a few years since I'd seen him. He obviously moved to Melbourne in the meantime, and he got married, and he'd had a great job at a major bank for quite some time. I met up with him on a cloudy Melbourne Sunday afternoon out in the suburb of Sunshine, where he lives with his wife. And we walked from his house down to kind of the main drag and had lunch at an Afghani restaurant. Food was delicious. And the thing that struck me most about seeing Gehan again was he was just more somber. He's had some stuff going in his life, and the way he looks at the rest of the world has changed fairly significantly. I think he feels it. I think it weighs kind of heavily on him, as it probably should all of us, given the state we're all in. But it was just very, very interesting to hear how his values had kind of changed and the priorities in his life, and it's just fascinating. As you get older and you have this history and you have these memories of people, and you realize that the people aren't static. If you keep in contact with a friend, you may not notice how they change over time. But if you go years without seeing someone and then they go through a lot of stuff, it's people change. It's not just a plot device in movies and books and things. People actually change. I guess maybe this is a bit of a recurring theme on this podcast, because it does seem like I mostly talk to people I haven't seen in a very long time. I am going to try and change that in the next few weeks, because I have closer friends who I see semi-regularly who have not been on the podcast. Hopefully we'll be hearing a bit more from them in the near future. But anyway, this Melbourne opportunity just kind of presented itself, and here we are. This episode was the fourth podcast that I'd recorded in 3 days while I was in Melbourne. So as you'll be able to tell in this conversation, my voice was a bit ragged by this point. In this episode, Gehan and I catch up on what he's been up to, how he met his wife Raina, how they made a long-distance relationship work, what he's been up work-wise, and then leaving work and then going through some mental health issues that he's had to acknowledge and address and make peace with. There are a few times that I definitely hear the guy I knew in high school when he laughs in this one. I don't want to say maudlin, but he doesn't laugh as much as he used to. But it is nice to hear it when he does. I don't mean this to be a depressing thing, because in this case it's arguably a sign of responsibility, perhaps, becoming an adult who's trying to make the world a better place. But anyway, you listen and find out. This is episode 14, Gehan Palipana. I like to start these podcasts by asking the guest who they are and how they know me. So, guest, who are you and how do you know me?
So, my name is Gehan Palipana. I know Scott because I went to school with him for pretty much, for all of high school. I think I met you in year 8, didn't I?
Were we in the same class in year 8? I remember definitely 9 and 10 we were in the same form class.
Yeah, or maybe I met you through Nick in year 9.
Yes.
Okay, so I lied. only from year 9 to 12.
I remember in 9 and 10, there was kind of you and Nick and Addie were a bit of a trio.
Yep.
And then there was kind of me and Pierre.
Yep.
And I got saddled with Pierre a bit. He was a weird dude.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. He was my friend.
Yep.
He was a bit of a weird dude in some ways.
He introduced me to Warhammer, so he'll always be awesome for that.
And so he'll always be responsible for the giant hole in your teenage wallet.
Oh, no, more like the giant hole in my, time as a kid, just reading those codexes and stuff.
Who did you play in Warhammer? Which race?
Oh, I never played. I just watched.
You didn't?
And all of the money issues I never had. It was great.
That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Because the lore of Warhammer 40k is quite interesting. It's like so it's an epic. It's set in the far distant future, 40,000 years in the future, I guess, and with like all these alien races fighting. But like even the humans are kind of very villainous, and they're like a massive evil theocracy and led by an immortal god emperor or something. And
it's like this hilariously grimdark sort of, completely over the top, but it's so satisfying for some reason. You just, whether it's reading the books themselves or just on Wikipedia, it's a massive time sink for me.
Are there any other kind of wiki wormholes you fall down in terms of like a fictional universe? You don't actually get into the content, but you just like reading about?
For me, that's probably Marvel and DC. Although I do read a couple of like the main characters and the main storylines, but I spend tons of time like reading up about these obscure characters from 1972 that only appeared once, but for some reason he's as powerful as God and he never came back, and it's really cool to see what, how they've sort of moved away from that completely zany sort of comic world to more grounded in gritty realism now.
I do that every time I see a superhero movie. I don't really read comics regularly. I've just read a few over the years. Some of the big ones like The Killing Joke and Superman Red Sun and stuff like, and Old Man Logan. I've kind of, it's come through work so many times. I've kind of skimmed it enough that I know the whole plot of
the movie or the whole series of
the original Old Man Logan was a one-shot comic, and I think he's since been the character of Old Man Logan has since been integrated into the mainstream continuity.
I think he's the Wolverine or male Wolverine, I guess, for the current Marvel universe. I could be wrong, which doesn't make any sense.
You're right, no, because the original is presumed dead. He's frozen in adamantium, I believe.
Yeah, insane.
And Old Man Logan has come from his dystopian alternate dimension, and he's now fighting alongside the rest of them.
X-23, the girl? Yeah.
So, Gehan, I haven't seen you in quite a few years. Not since, probably before you moved to Melbourne.
Yeah, it was.
It might have been at the AC/DC concert we were talking about off mic. So, last time Akadaka toured Brisbane, they played at QE2 Stadium, and we caught up for some Halo beforehand with a few friends.
With one vengeful, angry friend in particular. But yeah, was that the last time?
There might have been like a catch up with some of the guys. Yeah, like Tway and Koi since then. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like I haven't seen you in Melbourne.
Yeah, no, definitely
I haven't
not.
seen you since you got married as well.
Yeah.
When did you first meet your wife?
I met her about 3 weeks before I moved to Melbourne.
Oh, so she was in Brisbane?
Yeah. We're both from Brisbane originally. And I met her at a Christmas party. And then a couple of weeks later, I invited her to my farewell party. And then we sort of met and we liked each other. And then I moved to Melbourne. And she kept pestering me like for a year, I think, because she liked me and I didn't realize. So I was just like, yeah, whatever. Didn't respond to her for days or multiple messages. But then we both went to New York together with 12 other people. It's a huge group. And we became a couple in New York.
Right.
Yeah.
She must have been really keen if she just met this guy who was about to move to Melbourne and kept on you for a year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't speak for her, but hopefully. Well, no, she married me. Of course she was. But yeah, we did the whole long distance thing and that was a total pain and I wouldn't recommend anyone do it, but it was really cool.
How do you make it work long distance?
She pretty much made it work, to be honest. Like regular communication, making sure that when you're together, you don't fight, or if you do, at least resolve it before you go back, because it's so easy to just like let things die when you're 1,800 k's apart. But she was the architect of it, to be honest. She's a really awesome communicator. She never gets angry, and she made it work. And I've sort of been really lucky in that respect.
What do you think you bring to the relationship?
Not much. Well, I've helped her become a lot more aware of her social and environmental impacts. Because that's a huge passion of mine, and it's an area that I'm very interested in. So as a result of that, she's, I think, a lot more environmentally conscious, but also conscious of the supply chain impacts of the purchasing decisions and stuff that she makes. So yeah, she's got all these ethical purchasing programs. She's really keen on supply chain transparency, things like that, and she's quite appreciative of that. So
that's environmental. What do you mean by social?
Oh, so like, where are your jeans being manufactured? Is it by a 12-year-old girl in Afghanistan, or what sort of conditions are they being manufactured in? What rates are we paying the people who produce those goods and services, or who even farm the raw material, all the way down the chain? Like, what are the social and ethical impacts of what we're doing?
So you worked at a major bank when you moved down to Melbourne for a long time.
Yeah.
And you've recently quit. You're working in a sector that's much more aligned with these kind of really strong environmental and social values. Tell me a bit about what you're doing now for work.
So I was really lucky at the bank because my role was entirely supply chain sustainability and environmental sustainability. So basically got to sit there and build that program and just make sure that the bank was spending its money in a good way, making sure that we're using robust, transparent, environmental and socially responsible things. The reason I left was because I wanted to focus a lot more on a more direct impact that I thought I could make in finance. So what I did was I left, and we've set up, myself and two others have set up a startup that's looking to get people's investment portfolios and superannuation portfolios more directly aligned with their own ethical interests. So
ethical in investing, that kind
of
thing. Yeah.
So right now there's a huge move towards ethical investing, and the amount of funds that we're talking about is it's unreal. In Australia alone, there's something like $2.5 trillion worth of superannuation, and for the most part, people don't understand where their money is or how much super they have. And they don't understand that there's a really, really powerful impact that they can make by saying, I want my super invested in X, Y, or Z. So what we're hoping to do is get people to understand that link and go, all right, wow, I'm making a 7%, per year return, but I'm invested in Halliburton, or I'm invested in some horrible company that's exploiting children in the third world, and just really focus on that. And ideally, like, our end state is to have people say, I want a completely carbon neutral portfolio. And that's the product that we're trying to sell.
It's one thing to, I guess, make a company that offers, advice on how people can be an ethical investor, but it's another thing to really get that message out there to the general public. How do you do that?
Yeah, there's a pretty big disconnect, I think, between the generations on that. The research that we've done shows that for the most part, people between the ages of 35 to 50, they're focused on living. They're focused on, just surviving through their daily expenses. And there's a small subset of very active and very wealthy older generation, baby boomer era or retiree era super and wealth management clients. But there is an enormous groundswell of millennials and younger people who, the vast majority of millennials believe in climate change or anthropogenic climate change. It's a non-issue for them. And something like 88% of young investors and people who are just moving into the market and starting to make a salary and having super, they're saying, yeah, we're not interested in so much in maximizing our return. we want to make sure that what we're invested in is ethically investing. So that's the market that we're targeting. So to answer your question about how do we get the word out there, these people exist and they're already looking for the product. It's just that the finance industry hasn't quite caught up to them yet. I think a lot of people just look at finance, and especially like the more complex wealth instruments, and they just go, no, it's too hard for me, or I don't have enough money to make a difference, or whatever the case might be. They just think they're not a client, or they're not part of the market that these wealth advisors want to tap. But you are, anyone who has money or is making money and is looking to do the right thing, there are products out there for people right now. Do
you think, is that part of a deliberate disenfranchising of consumers by like the established institutions to keep people kind of in the dark about what they can actually do with their investing?
I'm not sure if it's intentional. I know that there's a really strong sort of traditional view of, especially super, it's meant to be quite a risk-free product. The idea is that at the end of the day, people have enough money to retire on. So you don't want to be too out there or too creative with the products. And because of that, a lot of these companies have taken a really conservative view. So they don't tend to say, oh, we've got this, this new cool product, because new is inherently risky. So they just think that their market doesn't want that. But now, especially and I don't want to keep, sort of harping on about how great the millennials are. This is just talking about demand. But millennials especially have shown that they're willing to sacrifice maximizing their return, even up to 50 basis points, say half a percent in returns to actually do the right thing. So that's one of those things that's changing. And the other thing is data. Like, we didn't have this sort of data about what people wanted or what they were looking to do before. And now we do. So the products are coming.
What's changed? How did we get that data about what people actually want to invest in?
Well, I think there are a lot of big changes that have happened around what we call ESG, like environmental, social, and governance risks in the community. Those things weren't really factored into business decisions in the past. But, whereas 50 years ago, if something like the Rana Plaza textiles manufacturing, tragedy had happened, no one would really hear about it. When it happened, I think in 2006, it sent shockwaves around the world. Every media outlet in the world was basically reporting on what had happened there. And people started to think, oh my God, my clothes that I've bought from XYZ brand came from that factory. So there was a really, really very direct link for people. And that started to, in essence, things like Rana Plaza created this whole idea of looking for sustainable supply chains. And that's sort of filtering down into the next levels, into our investments and into our, not just the products we buy, but everything else in life. So I think that's where it came from, just understanding that, what we're buying and what we're doing has impacts outside of our wallet.
And for you in this new position, how are you enjoying this new job compared to working at the big bank?
I really liked working at the bank. I thought it was a great position, and to be honest, I got paid to spend the bank's money in ways that didn't make them money, but helped do the right thing. So it was like an absolute win-win-win for me. This job is different. It's, in some respects it's better, in some respects it's worse. I get to do exactly what I want. We get to focus on the customers we want and building the product we want. We don't have to take into consideration anyone else's interests apart from what we think is the best for our clients and what we're looking to do. So in that sense, we're not restricted in any way. But on the flip side, I got to meet amazing people who are super keen and super committed to making big environmental changes as well. Like my mentors who still work at the bank or in other large organizations, and I've only met those people and created those strong networks because of that job.
It must be hard going from working for one of the most established companies in Australia to starting out a business entirely on your own with a small group.
Yeah, well, none of us has an accounting background. None of us have been involved in startups before. So we were starting from the drawing board, really. I mean, incorporating as a company, all right, cool, we have to do that. Wait, what does that mean? And, what is the business structure that we need to actually to be forget most effective, to be, legally able to sell the products we want to sell. So we had to go right back down to the first principles when it came to starting a business. And it's funny because we'd already built the product by that point. We had the logical engine behind how we created a carbon neutral investment portfolio. We'd created like the sales plans and everything. So what we spent most of our time doing was just like, okay, Google, what's a business?
What's a business?
What does limited by shareholder mean? What does proprietary mean? All of those questions. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So we need to be an Australian proprietary limited company, and we need to have a share split this way. And, just picking up those skills is what took time.
Did you think about bringing someone on board as part of the team, someone who had experience in starting a company?
We couldn't afford them.
Oh, okay.
We definitely thought about it. Yeah. People who, there are whole organizations devoted to helping startups, get through that whole admin sort of layer. But it's capital intensive. It's a problem. Yeah.
Did you have a prepared topic you want to talk about?
I'm not necessarily sure I've prepared, but I wouldn't mind talking about mental health and, I guess the politics around environmental sustainability.
Sure. I guess on a personal level, you were saying over lunch that you had a rough year last year.
Yeah. So I was clinically depressed. It's probably something that I've been building for a while, but, it became almost unbearable. I got the diagnosis, and I think, I know it sounds really selfish, but that really helped me empathize with mental health issues and just made me realize how not only underfunded they are in Australia and in most countries, but also just how taboo the whole idea of mental health issues are or is.
What kind of things were you dealing with before you were diagnosed?
Panic attacks constantly. I'd wake up, with my heart beating out of my chest, cold sweats, just this constant oppressive feeling of, I've got too much on my plate. I don't have enough time. I'm not good enough to get it done. Just this wave of negativity, and it wouldn't end. So I dealt with that for probably 6 months. Yeah, I'd say 6 months. And, my sister she's a doctor. So I spoke to her about this stuff, and she said, look, you might need to look into this. So luckily for me, I had at least a starting point on the road to getting diagnosis. But it can be really tough because, at the end of the day, it strips you of motivation to even make yourself better, which is the really tricky part about it. And it's not tangible. Other people thought I was doing fine for the most part.
There can be such a disconnect between how people see you and how you're really feeling.
Yeah.
Was it hard for you to hear when your sister suggested that you might need professional help?
Yeah, it was. Not that I'd, sort of brushed away mental health issues, but I just thought there were problems for other people.
Yeah. That seems to be a key thing. Even if you think of yourself as being, supportive of mental health issues and, we gotta get better at this. When it affects you directly, it can be very difficult to recognize.
Yeah. And I think there's an element of pride as well for me because, once I'd sort of accepted that might be an issue, my thought process was, well, why can't I deal with this? What's wrong with me that I can't just get over these issues that I'm facing? And that's something that took a while to deal with as well. Just, okay, maybe you're depressed. Maybe you have a mental health issue. That's okay. When I was thinking, no, it's not okay. I've failed in some way.
What was Raina's reaction to all this?
She was very, very understanding. Her background is she's got a psychology background, and her whole family deals with mental health issues. So she was on board from the get-go with me getting the support I needed.
Was she part of the reason why you did? Like, was she concerned before you got diagnosed?
She wasn't concerned, but I could tell that I was negatively impacting her,
So it was affecting your relationship?
Yeah, it was.
How?
We've always been pretty open and communicative. I tended to shut down when I was going through the worst of it, and it could be for days on end where I would be almost non-verbal with her. It's not because I especially wanted to shut her out or anything. It's just I didn't feel like it was worth communicating some of these issues. I thought they were, frankly, pathetic issues for me to be facing. Embarrassment. Yeah, just a cocktail of different things that made me stop or not tell her.
So when you sought professional help, what methods did they give you?
It's funny because I saw 2 or 3 different psychologists. I can't say, one of them definitively helped me. I can't say I was even like overly impressed with the advice they gave me. Not because it was bad advice, but it's because it's not a mystery, a lot of this stuff. It's you have to take care of your body. You have to, scale back the work. The advice they give you is very, or at least that they gave me anyway, was very simple and straightforward. So I was expecting a magic bullet basically, and they didn't give it to me. But they definitely emphasized the importance of physical activity, and that had dropped off for me. That had dropped off a cliff. And I definitely noticed that the first time I went for a run after, I felt amazing for about 3 hours. And yeah, one of the psychologists told me, okay, so you enjoy running, start running again and never stop until you die. That was what he told, word for word what he told me. And, it, for me at least, it was really powerful, and that works for me. But, I also massively scaled back my workload. I took steps to, a big one is, mental health programs like Headspace. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
No. What's that about?
It's fantastic. It's basically it's a tool, like it's a phone-based app, and it teaches you a whole bunch of breathing exercises and meditation techniques. Mindfulness, clearing your head at the end of the day. There were days when I couldn't go to sleep for 4 or 5 hours because I'd be shivering and sweating and just like thinking about, the issues that I had to deal with. And then I'd turn on this meditation program, 10 minutes, it would calm me right down. It helped me, dial my brain's, rumination back down to 0 and help me sleep. So that was a huge, huge one. And I can't recommend that enough, whether it's Headspace or whatever these other programs exist out there. But mindfulness and meditation and breathing exercises, they're really, really good.
Were you prescribed any medication?
Yeah, I was. I don't actually remember what it was.
So you're not on that anymore?
No, I'm not. That was fantastic as well.
Was it like an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety thing?
It was an antidepressant. I was prescribed that pretty much at the onset to help me, I guess, normalize a little, while the more long-term solutions like mindfulness and reducing my workload and those sorts of things took effect. And also vitamin D. Funnily enough, apparently there's a pretty strong linkage between vitamin D deficiency and depression and anxiety.
Where do you get vitamin D?
I took them in a concentrated pill form, but just being out in the sun.
Oh, that's the sunlight one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Is that where you get, like, in the Scandinavian countries, seasonal effectiveness disorder?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The highest rates of suicide in the world, despite, basically living in socialist utopias.
But it's a midnight socialist utopia for most of the year.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. But the correlation's pretty strong between, the seasonal effectiveness disorder and lack of sunlight.
Where did this fit in the timeline of you leaving your job at the bank and starting your new business?
I was diagnosed, I'd say, in about... So I started feeling, pretty horrible in about May.
So a couple of months after you left the bank?
No, sorry. I left the bank in March this year.
Oh, this year? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so before you were still at the bank?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So 2016 May is about when this started happening. Went through, it sort of silently until about August. And then I got the diagnosis and was taking the antidepressants from September till about December. I quit in March after 3 months of basically making that decision. And by that point, I was feeling a lot better. I was much more productive, and I think I was managing my situation a lot better as well, probably quite sustainably as well. But I made the decision to leave because, having made a lot of those changes, I felt like it was a good time to I guess, end that chapter and start completely afresh with an idea that I've been toying with for a few years anyway.
And where are you mentally at the moment?
Obviously much better, but I definitely still have days where I feel terrible, where I'm very unproductive because of the thoughts that I come across. But now that I told my family and my friends and Raina, they all know about it, and that's really important, I think, because you don't have to hide anything. It's not something that should be stigmatized, I think. And I've got a lot more tools now to deal with it as well. If I feel myself sort of ruminating on a topic and just spiraling, I'll pull out the breathing exercises, and that'll at least stop it at a level where it's manageable without getting too bad. And if worst comes to worst, I can go back to therapy or take the prescription drug path. But there's a precedent now, like I know the steps I need to take.
You're equipped now.
Yeah, like I don't think I'll walk into it unprepared.
And do you think part of that really opening up to the people in your life, is that important, not just for yourself, but I guess to be kind of an ambassador in society for mental health?
That sounds really amazing. And, I did want to sort of destigmatize it a lot. So I told anyone at any opportunity, basically, that, I had this, or I dealt with depression, and, I was happy to answer questions and I didn't shy away from it or anything. And yeah, I definitely wanted to make that conscious decision to not hide it, because I think, not that, I judge anyone who wants to, but I didn't want for people to feel like it was something that I considered a black mark against myself. So I did publicize it. It was really, really hard initially, though, to tell, because my old boss is one of my heroes. Like, she's amazing. And to tell her, look, I can't do the work that I've been doing for the past, X number of years, and I need time off. And this is the reason why. That was a conversation that took me, 2 weeks to build up to. But once I told her, obviously no issues. And it was just a lot easier to tell other people after that as well.
What kind of range of reactions did you get from people?
Universally sympathetic and accepting. Yeah, there wasn't really much deviation. It's like, oh my God, what can we do to help you? No one really said, oh, you're a loser or anything like that, or all those weird sort of reactions that you think people might have in your head. I know I didn't experience any of that. People were really, really supportive.
Is that a new thing in society, do you think? Are we just more accepting in general when people open up like that?
Oh, for sure. I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, when you're talking about, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but things like the number of rapes in society is going up. And it's because we're starting to recognize and catalog, these unacceptable activities that people do as the horrible activity it is. So we're seeing a lot more, we're shining a lot more light into some of these darker sort of unreported areas. It's the same thing with mental health issues that, people might have dismissed as people being, just the local oddball or whatever. They're starting to recognize, hey, maybe there's a mental health implication there. And we're starting to understand and report on this stuff a lot better.
Did you have another prepared topic you want to talk about?
Yeah, the environment. I've been sort of poking at that for the majority of this, but
well, it's a big part of your work.
Yeah.
When did your environmental fervor, do you think, really pick up? Because I always knew you as being kids at an inner city school. We were pretty progressive in like the conversations we had with teachers and stuff. Like, we weren't super active. I think I remember, I went to a march against the Iraq War at high school, but like not super active at that age. So when for you did you start to really, did it kick into high gear in terms of how you lived your own life and what you were doing with your work?
Yeah, it's funny because you'd think it's the sort of thing that just sort of slowly builds over time, but I can think of two really distinct memories. One was doing an environmental law elective subject. And I just, I had a lot of reading to do about the proposed Australian Carbon Emissions Fund, and I thought that was amazing. And I read into a bit more detail about the mechanism behind carbon offsetting and why that works, and the projects that, that it funded. And then I started looking into why we're even, looking at offsets in the first place, and looked at the carbon dioxide problem, and just sort of kept taking steps back that way. And then, became really sold on, I guess, a government-led approach to climate change. But the other thing, and this is a lot, it's completely different, is I was at a buffet in the Gold Coast at a place called Food Fantasy in one of the casinos. And we were at a seafood buffet, me and, a few friends, and the lunch, session was wrapping up, and a guy, one of the waiters there, he wheeled out an entire tray of Moreton Bay bugs, steaming hot, beautiful Moreton Bay bugs. And the guy at the counter said, all right, the lunch session is closed. So just as he'd wheeled this enormous tray, like probably 16, maybe 20 bugs out of the kitchen, he turned around and threw them all into a bin. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. Like, I'd obviously seen food wastage, but for him to just walk out the door and then walk back in and throw it into a bin, that just, something inside me, just like a realization happened. And I was like, that can't be normal. And went home, immediately looked up food wastage in restaurants, especially buffet. Yeah, it's unreal. And then again, sort of cascaded down into where else are we wasting resources and the lives that we've killed to eat this food, and just wasting that. And that was another moment for me.
It's kind of bizarre. Like, as would you say you're a thrifty person?
I think environmentalism has sort of forced me to be thrifty.
But so were you when you were before that, do you think?
No.
Okay. I'd say generally I'm fairly thrifty. Like, I shop around for the best deals, and like I almost always like eat everything on my plate. I think I left a bit of rice at lunch because I was totally stuffed. But like, I'm one of those people who feels bad about leaving food on my plate.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like you think about like how much food you've saved, how many extra kilojoules of energy that you put into your body, even when you didn't feel like eating anymore over the years. And then you just like, you go out in a commercial or industrial setting and you see the kind of wastage that occurs every day. And it's like, what my contributions to save stuff is not a drop in the galaxy of what is happening.
Yeah. Have you seen that food waste documentary on ABC? I think it's by Craig, one of the Chaser boys.
Craig Rucastle?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it. Sorry.
It's amazing. It's talking about food wastage and the consumer-led tactics, I guess, we can use to reduce it. But you mentioned, that your personal food wastage is a drop in the ocean, and it is. But we can send signals to the producers that we want, more sustainable or less food wastage in our supply chains. And that message, as it goes down the supply chain, gets amplified, basically. So if you say, I want a better banana, or sorry, not a better, I want imperfect bananas and I'm happy to eat them, that might save you, 50 bananas at your local fruit shop. That might save 10,000 bananas at the local wholesaler, and they might save 100,000 bananas at the actual farmer, because they're not culling these, products that they might have assumed people didn't want.
How do you send that kind of signal as an individual consumer? How do you send that message back up the supply chain?
That's really hard. Look, to be honest, I'm not sure. Well, you can engage in some level of activism by just telling people like Woolies, sending them emails, especially to their environmental teams. I know, having worked at one in a bank, that stuff gets sent to us. Doesn't matter, where it's from or what the question is, whether it's, wholesale debt financing for hundreds of millions of dollars. If they mention green or enviro, it comes to us and we're like, okay, what do we do with this? But those questions do get taken seriously, and, people do try to find a resolution for them. So that's one way of doing it. But, just if you become an advocate and you convince one other person, then all of the work that they do, it's like some sort of weird environmental Ponzi scheme. Yeah, but, anyone that they encourage or anyone that they sort of like empower to go out and talk about this stuff is, they've done that as a result of you. So if you can just tell other people and ask them to motivate others, that's got a multiplying effect too.
Day to day in your everyday routine, from when you wake up till, say, when you start work, what decisions are you making in that time where you're trying to be environmentally conscious?
So I cycle to work a fair bit. Well, actually, now that I'm working from home, I'm carbon neutral. Yes, because
Do you just ride around the block a few times?
I just potter about home, really.
That'd be kind of funny, actually. If we were talking at lunch about like dividing your work and home life when you work at home, maybe if you walked out the front door like you would used to when you worked in the city, you do cycle around the block, then come in the back door as if it's a different building. That might like help you psychologically.
Yeah, in doing that, if you got ready and you put on, professional work clothes, I think that might sort of help you project that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I should probably do it.
Sorry, back to the question. What do you do in the morning? That's
it's a tough one. I mean, in the morning, like I don't think I do too much that really impacts my carbon footprint.
Or even little stuff like for part of your breakfast.
Yeah. Okay. So every breakfast I have, or I have had for, as long as I can remember at least, has been grain-based. It's cereals and nuts and things like that. If you're not using too much milk, if you're not using animal products or eating meat, that's a huge impact that you're having. I think something like a third of an individual's carbon footprint is diet related. So if you can cut meat out of your diet, even at that one step of the way, you're doing a lot. Probably a lot more than turning off a bunch of lights, which you should also do, by the way.
And it can be even like there are micro decisions you can make within that. If you're not willing to totally cut out meat, so you could reduce meat, and you can eat, and different types of meat produce different carbon emissions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the worst of the worst is probably grain-fed or grass-fed beef. That's bad in terms of methane, carbon dioxide, and also water consumption.
Yeah.
I've heard stats around, 80% of the grain grown in the world is fed to livestock instead of feeding humans. Like if we just cut out that middleman, I guess, and ate that, we'd have enough to feed people. We already make enough food to feed everyone on the planet, 5 meals a day or something insane like that. But all of this food gets wasted and gets fed to cows that we're then consuming, It seems like a pretty roundabout way to get the nutrients we need. But yeah, like you said, there's definitely a hierarchy of environmental impacts for the meat we eat. So even just tweaking those choices and scaling back a little has meaningful impacts. You don't need to go cold turkey to do the right thing.
And what about your shower?
So all of our shower heads are the water-saving ones. We take 2-minute showers.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying when it's freezing cold at 5 a.m, like this morning when I was going for the ride. Actually, the other thing I should mention is that we buy green power. So 100% of the electricity in the house is green power. And that adds probably $30 a year to our bill. But what that means is that all of the power that we're using in the house is carbon neutral. And there's a lot of talk around residential solar and how amazing that is, and it absolutely is. But bang for buck, you can do a lot more by buying green power from your commercial power distributors, because it forces them to build. They're not just going to put one solar panel in a farm for you. If you're buying it, they have to build 100,000 megawatt solar farm. So then they have to go out and sell that extra solar capacity to other people, and then they'll reduce their green power rates. And it just all has like this really awesome like feedback loop. And, it's $20 to $30 a year compared to, I really sound like I'm attacking solar, but I'm not, right? I'm just saying $30 a year and you can have completely carbon neutral power versus, $6 to $7 grand for a decent solar panel setup. So
it can be a lot easier of a measure to take. Like, for example, if you're a renter, like you can still choose to have green power. In most depending on where you are, it's a lot easier than installing solar panels for many people.
Yeah, that's probably how I should have sold it instead of like attacking the solar industry, which I'm totally not doing, by the way. I'm really not selling that very well. But yeah, it's the cost outlay is a fraction of what potentially other things you can do are. It's much more flexible, like you said, with for renters or people not in a position to install infrastructure into their home. Yeah, it's a really great way of doing it, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of people.
To see the world we're living in now, where there's still so much work to be done, and the gap at which we can halt really severe climate change is very, very quickly narrowing. Is that a source of stress in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way to get around it. I think most people in the sustainability space have a pretty sort of pragmatic or even pessimistic view of all of this, because while everything that we need to do can be done today with today's technology and today's the problem solving mechanisms that we have, getting people on board is the biggest issue, and who knows how long that'll take. This isn't the sort of problem where it's a zero sum game. It's every step of the way we're losing something that's irreplaceable, whether it's wildlife or whether it's ecosystems or habitat loss, losing a chunk of the Great Barrier Reef. If we lose that, that's gone forever. Not to sound too preachy, but it's billions of years of evolution that have led to that point, have created this beautiful natural wonder for us to enjoy. And not only are we depriving them of their right to exist, but we're also not letting our children enjoy that spectacle as well. So,
and even beyond an aesthetic thing, because I think a mistake in the past, especially in the past, the green movement has really focused on the aesthetics of things, of this beautiful rainforest that's being cut down, of these majestic cows that are being slaughtered in this way. Whereas a lot of the environmental degradation that's happening is having an impact on the rest of the global environment that we can't even foresee.
Yeah.
Especially like the Great Barrier Reef in the ocean, where everything is so interconnected. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with so much coral bleaching and stuff, but it can't be good.
Yeah. I mean, and while we don't know perhaps the impacts of losing the barrier reef, we know the impacts of a whole range of other things that we've done. For example, all of the phosphorus and nitrogen that we use to make fertilizer, the concentrations of that stuff having been washed out to sea over the past few decades has made most of Europe's coastline fish and ocean life dead zones.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you go to Cape Cod in the US, there are no cod anymore because they're all dead. Most of the fishing in Greece and Spain and these fishing heavy countries, they've moved to other places like Sudan. You got the piracy and all the things that have resulted from commercial fishing operations coming in and taking these people's livelihoods. Like, there are big impacts, and they're so far removed from that initial overfishing that there's definitely examples out there.
What do you think the world's going to look like in 30 years' time, environmentally?
I think we will have lost a lot. The whole humanity ending, the cries of utter annihilation, that's obviously not going to happen. But a lot of the biodiversity and healthy ecosystems that we take for granted now will be gone. Well, obviously, the deforestation is another big issue. But I think the auto industry, at least, will look a whole lot better. And I think while our need for energy is growing, the rate at which we're turning it into a less impactful way of extracting that energy is also growing almost exponentially. And when I say that, I'm just talking about things like solar city, other renewable energy sources, more efficient home appliances. Like a TV now, like these big 50-inch plasma behemoths are using less energy than one of those like bulb CRTs from 30 years ago. So that's going to continue on. So while we might be using a lot more of this technology, I think our actual impact is going to be at or maybe slightly less than it is now.
You sound optimistic.
No. Please don't. No, I'm joking. like I said, we have all the tools that we need to combat climate change. It's whether we can drag, our governments and the climate change deniers kicking and screaming into a better world, and doing that in a time-bounded situation. That's the problem.
Have you talked to Raina about having children?
Yeah. We're not going to have children.
What was that decision based on, if I may ask?
I assume you're sort of getting at the what world are we leaving for our children?
Is it related to that?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. But there are other factors as well, So we haven't totally ruled out children. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. But as it stands now, we're probably not likely to have children for that reason, and also, and a few others as well.
So you don't think that the world is probably going to be a good enough place for someone that you would raise to live in?
I don't think it'll change that dramatically. And to be awfully selfish as well, in a country like Australia, our living situation isn't going to be too bad. If we lived in Southeast Asia, for instance, or in Bangladesh, where there's 300 million people who are below sea level, then that's it. Then that might be a more of a motivating factor. But I think the quality of life in Australia is still going to be pretty good. It's more that one of the reasons I mentioned is that we're much more keen to adopt, because
right.
there are, I don't know how many children there are. I'm assuming hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who they're in this world right now, and we have the chance to give them perhaps a much better life than they could have otherwise hoped for. So why wouldn't we do that instead of bringing more children into the world,
And the carbon footprint of a human being is massive.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because that's one of the reasons, people aren't dying anymore, Just in the past 80 years, we've seen the average life expectancy increase by something like 25 years, And if that tops out if we add another 25 years to that over the next 80 years, that's billions of people that the planet is supporting who otherwise wouldn't have been there.
And in pure economic terms, those are not 25 more productive years of a person's life necessarily.
No. We're getting pretty socially Darwinistic here, but that's the truth.
So you're definitely open to adoption.
That's what we want to do.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Like I'm probably not going to have kids either. And I've never really felt like I would have kids, and especially more than ever since I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, which is genetic. And if I had children of my own, there would be a 50% chance of the child having it as well. Like if I ever had kids, I think I would definitely try and adopt. Although I know have you done any research about it? I know it's a very difficult process.
Yeah, so we've done some research, and that was the thing that overwhelmingly sort of came out, that it's a very long, very involved process, but people who've fostered have told us that there are all these amazing ways that you can get involved almost immediately. You can, basically provide like relief fostering for children over the weekend, and it's a great idea. Like it gives, I guess, the weekday foster parents time off, and it gives you a chance to dip your toe in and help out these kids.
A demo version of parenting.
Yeah. It's like a trial period, and these sorts of things exist to make, because at the end of the day, departments want these children to leave state-sponsored care or foster care and into permanent homes. So they want to make it easy for you to make a right decision as well. But they definitely don't want these kids going to some sort of monster. So you understand why it takes so long.
Would you want like a baby, or would you be happy with like a kid who was a bit older?
We met, and I was thinking, a baby, obviously, but we met couple of Uber drivers actually in the US, and they were talking about moving into college or middle school age children that they fostered, and who they've got amazing relationships with it, and they've changed their lives. So that sort of opened us up to be a bit more flexible with the age as well. So I don't think we have an age in mind, really.
Is it more difficult are there particular age ranges that are more popular among foster parents?
I'm not sure on the hard numbers, but, there's all that developmental psychology that says, that sort of 1 to 7 age is where a lot of kids have hardwired emotional responses. So it must be tough dealing with 7 years of being in the foster care system, or not being in a stable family home. I'd imagine that would make it pretty complex sometimes to deal with those children.
And that would be like an age range where you could make the most difference, arguably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a purely economic perspective, bang for your buck, investing in children at the 0 to 3 age range provides immensely more value than the $100,000 you spend taking them from high school to college, for instance. So yeah, just from that perspective, it's more worth it.
Did you have, I can't remember, did I ask you if you have any life hacks that you use?
Yeah, actually, we sort of touched on it before, but meditation is amazing. And, it's not sitting under a waterfall in winter meditation. It's basically just clearing your mind for 10 minutes and focusing on whether it's breathing or just scanning your body and just being generally more aware of your own state of wellness. I find it so helpful. Like it's changed my life, really.
Is there a regular time of day that you meditate?
I always do it at night, just before I go to sleep, because I find it hard to get to sleep sometimes. But whenever you need to do it, I've done breathing exercise in the car when I've stressed out about a presentation, and it works. So as flexible as you need it to be to make you do it often is what you should aim for.
And what's the best way to get into meditation?
I think guided sessions is probably the best way, just so that you understand what you're doing.
It's like one-on-one with a person.
Well, one-on-one with a person, or even using like an app where, like I mentioned Headspace before, and it's basically a person talking you through like how you should be breathing and what you should think about, like all of those really basic things. And just having that point of concentration helps you block out everything else. And then when they're telling you the right things to do, that really helps as well. But you can go to YouTube, or basically these things are everywhere. These videos and apps and stuff are everywhere. So you don't need to just choose one.
Is there a spiritual element to it at all?
I'm an atheist, so no. But if you choose to look at it from a spiritual perspective, I mean, that's perfectly fine as well.
Do the exercises have like a spiritual basis, like where they come from?
I think, well, for the ones that I've used, they've mostly been ex-Buddhist monks or practicing Buddhist monks. And the meditation tends to center around Buddhist meditation practices, but it's a pretty universal thing across all religions. I'm sure, there are other methods out there that work as well. But they, like I said, the programs that I've used haven't focused too much on the spiritual side, more on just the what they call wellness. Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe it's just rebranding it for a less religious, target market.
I've learned about mindfulness recently from a guy at a party I was talking to. What does wellness mean?
I think they're interchangeable terms, to be honest. Like mindfulness, wellness, like it's almost like one of the things that they talk about, for example, is body scanning, right? And basically it's while you're doing your breathing exercises, blocking out other stimuli, just scanning through your body from head to toe and considering how you feel. How do your hands feel? How do your wrists feel? Whatever. Just thinking about it can make you incredibly aware of how you're feeling. Like, oh, actually, now that I think about it, my back is really stressed, or whatever it might be. And I've actually used that like on a bike ride as well. I felt horrible, and I just did a body scan and realized, okay, I need to stand up straight or increase my cadence or whatever it is. So it's helpful in a couple of different ways.
Well, what do you do for fun these days?
I play with my cat, I guess. I love going for hikes and going for rides, playing tennis. So I do that physical stuff for fun for the most part, and watch movies, really. That's about it.
Do you have a favorite genre of movie?
Look, I really like spaghetti westerns, but there's not many of them. So
every once in a while there's a new weird one that comes out. Like the ones that do get made are pretty good these days.
Yeah. It's funny because I think Old Man Logan is very much in that sort of vein.
It's absolutely a Western, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just really it's like a Morricone movie almost, I think, except without the amazing score. Sergio Leone, not Morricone.
Well, Ennio Morricone did some scores as well.
Yeah, he scored all of them.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Leone was the director, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I love listening to that as well. Just the soundtracks on repeat.
Old Man Logan very much had it shared a lot of beats, I think, with Unforgiven
Yeah,
in terms of it being a redemption story.
yeah. It's I don't even like the X-Men franchise really, but that movie for me sort of elevated, comic book movies. I thought it was amazing.
It was really interesting that it was directed by James Mangold, who did the previous Wolverine movie, The Wolverine, which was much more... It was a bit of a break from the rest of it, because the X-Men movies are pretty cheesy.
Yeah,
generally. The first standalone Wolverine one, Origins, was pretty awful.
Yeah.
It was a cheesy and awful version of that. The Wolverine was a bit better, but this is such a leap stylistically and tonally away from the rest of the X-Men universe.
I didn't even know that it was the same director.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes, I guess, about him, that he's so, flexible with how he can direct.
Casino Royale, which was widely seen as like revitalizing James Bond. I'm pretty sure that the same guy who directed GoldenEye.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And GoldenEye is like, probably as camp as Moonraker, really. Yeah. Wow, I had no idea. That's amazing.
I'm pretty sure that's right. I'll have to check that. I do a corrections bit in the outro of the podcast where I go back when I'm editing. I go back and check if there are any contentious things like, I'm not sure if this happened, and I'll go and check them.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I hate about podcasts is when people say stuff that's just wrong and it's wrong, or if they say, I don't know this, and you never find out whether they were right or not.
Yeah, yeah. I like doing my own, like checks on that sort of stuff. Like, oh yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Look it up.
Piece of shit.
Yeah.
Lying to me. Well, G-Man, thanks so much for talking to me today.
No worries, man. My pleasure.
It was really good catching up with you.
Yeah, same.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right. See ya.
So this brings to a conclusion my quartet of Melbourne podcasts. From next week on, you'll be hearing the warm humidity of Brisbane in people's voices. This week I'm not listening to Ravel or Bach or Vivaldi while I record this. I'm listening to John Williams' soundtrack to Jurassic Park, which turns out may be more distracting than useful for when I'm doing the intros and the outros. It's just too catchy. It's too catchy. I'm taken back to being a kid and waltzing around the room conducting this when my family wasn't home. Anyway, corrections for this episode. Climate change is not a real thing, and Gehan is worried about everything for nothing. No, I'm kidding. That's not true. No. Recycle. Use less water. Do all those things. Invest ethically. So I described the original Old Man Logan comic book story as a one-shot in this episode. It's not actually a one-shot, because that would be if it only spanned one issue, unconnected to a regular series. But the Old Man Logan storyline by Mark Miller was in fact part of the regular Wolverine comic book series from issue 66 to 72. The story was later collected into one edition and published as Old Man Logan, which would have been the one that I skimmed through at work. The director of the James Bond film GoldenEye, starring Pierce Brosnan, was Martin Campbell. Campbell did indeed later return to the franchise with the Daniel Craig reboot Casino Royale. He also directed movies including The Mask of Zorro and Green Lantern. Mixed track record, I would say. That is just about all for this week. No episode next week. If you're listening to this in the present, there won't be an episode next week because I'm going to be away. I'm going to be out of state recording a new album with a band I'm in called We All Want To. I don't think I've ever mentioned that band on the podcast, which is really remarkable considering that that's like the main thing I'm in now, and given how much time I devoted in the early episodes to my defunct band Go Go Fish. But yeah, so I'll be down there and I won't have time to do a new episode, but I'll be back the week after that. As always, you can contact me on gimmeenempathykpodcast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. I actually got some email this week from a listener. So shout out to Eva in Japan. Thank you very much for your email, Eva. I do know Eva already, so it's not totally random, but it was very nice to hear from her. And if you have a constructive criticism, always glad to hear it. Until next week, stay dinosaur, saurian, Jurassic, stay amber, stay chaotic, stay majestic. Yes.